Good morning, everybody. How are you? Everybody's bright-eyed. You've just carried the suitcases in, and this is your very first stop. Congratulations. I'm Karen Cooper from the Financial Aid Office, and with me today is TJ Fletcher, who is from Student Financial Services. And between the two of us, we're going to cover everything you need to know about money in Stanford. Sound good? So I always like to joke that this group who shows up first thing Thursday morning, you are the ones who need to understand how all of this works before you can enjoy the rest of the weekend. Is that right? As opposed to the crowd who shows up on Saturday morning, I worry about them a little bit. But you'll see in the schedule, we repeat this every day. There's no need to come again. We cover the same information, unless we really confuse you. And also, I want to mention the Financial Aid Office is open throughout the weekend. So if you've got individual issues, questions about your treatment in the financial aid process, you are more than welcome to stop by the office and we can sit down with you with your information in front of us. So with that said, welcome. Really happy to have you here this morning. Congratulations. Lots of hard work went into your admission at Stanford, to the students' admission, not mom and dad. And we're really happy to have you here. So this morning, one more housekeeping thing. We are actually being videotaped this morning for those who weren't able to make the trip to this weekend. So unless I am really confusing you, I'm going to ask you to hold your questions to the end, and we're going to save time to do a question and answer session. So, sound good? All right, let's go ahead and get going. What we'd like to talk about this morning is Stanford's financial aid program. I'll give you some background and talk about where we are and how things work into the future. We'll talk about financing options, ways to pay for that expected parent contribution that you might have seen on your award letter. And we'll talk about billing and paying and how all of that works at Stanford to give you a little bit of a head start in understanding how all of this works. So I hope that meets your needs this morning. So let's start with the Financial Aid Office. We are over in Montague Hall, directly across the street from the Alumni Center where you registered this morning, so easy to find. And we handle lots of things in the Financial Aid Office. Counseling, talking to students about money matters, their financial aid, awarding goes on there in the Financial Aid Office. So all of Stanford's undergraduate financial aid gets funneled through the Financial Aid Office. There's no secret pots of money anywhere else. We also handle outside scholarships there in the Financial Aid Office. So many of our undergraduates are bringing outside scholarships to us from other foundations and organizations. So I'll talk about that a little bit, how that integrates with a need-based financial aid package. But know that even if you're not receiving need-based aid, outside scholarships, the Financial Aid Office will help you manage those. And we also have a federal work-study program where we help students with employment issues. So all of that happens in the Financial Aid Office. So you're here this morning probably because you have completed the financial aid process at this point. Most people have. A complete financial aid application consists of the profile, IDOC, and what that is a way we collect tax returns from our families, and the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid. So those three pieces make up a complete application. And hopefully you've received an award letter from us. The point I want to make here is that very first one we printed out on pretty paper and mail it to you. So mom and dad definitely get to see it. We want to make sure everybody can put their hands on it. But from now on, when we make any new awards or any adjustments to existing awards, what happens is we send an email to the student and instruct them to log into Access, our student system, which is also where you go to accept your offer of admission. And later in the process, that's where students will enroll in classes. It's where they'll see their bill information. There's lots of good information in the Access. And that is where they'll always be able to see a PDF copy of award letters. So students you often need to share that PDF of your award letter with mom and dad. We're not communicating directly with the parents at that point, it's with the student. So hopefully you are here today because you're making decisions about how you're going to handle that net cost that showed up on the award letter and probably scared some of you a little bit, right? Okay, so let's get into it. So probably one of your first questions was, how did the financial aid office come up with that? What were they thinking, right? Well, this is what we were thinking. This is the formula that we use to decide how much scholarship aid to give students. Cost of attendance minus an expected parent contribution minus the student responsibility, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. The remainder, what's left at that point, is what we award in scholarships and grants. That's how we decide how much scholarship to award. And that's why if you come in to talk to the financial aid office and want to have a conversation about, I need more financial aid, we will sort of shift that conversation to, why is the expected parent contribution too high for you? Right, so if we can reduce that expected parent contribution, if there are reasons for that, then we can increase the scholarship aid. So this formula is important to us. But there's another formula, cost of attendance minus scholarships and grants equals net cost, that I think is important for all of you. As you're comparing financial aid offers from school to school, that's how you understand, there may be resources available to help you manage that net cost. But in the end, even if it's loans, student loans, parent loans, in the end, that is the money that you're going to have to pay in one way or another, that net cost. So that's important when you're comparing school to school. And I'll talk about each of those aspects. And it just so happens that our award letter, I know you can't read all the little numbers, but our award letter is laid out in that format. We've got the cost of attendance at the top, scholarships and grants, and that results in a net cost. And all those areas at the bottom are really suggestions for you about how you meet that net cost. Right? And they're just suggestions. There's not a point where we ask you to write us a check for that amount, right? These are this is what we're thinking when we're putting together the financial aid package and how we came up with the amount of scholarship that we did. So let's talk about each one of those components. So on Leland's award letter here is the cost of attendance. And the point to make here, I'm sure you've heard this as you sat through, financial aid presentations during high school. Financial aid offices use this concept of the full cost of attendance. It includes both the direct costs, the things that we actually bill you for, tuition, room and board, that campus health service fee. There's some fees that you face, one-time fees that you face as new students. All of those are in the cost of attendance. But in addition, we recognize that to be a full participating member of the Stanford community, you're going to need some money for personal expenses, right? We want you to do laundry. We want you to be able to have a cell phone, all the basics of being a student. And we want you to be able to buy books. That's really important to be a student. So there is an allowance in our cost of attendance for the cost of books. And you also need to get here. So travel, the travel amount in the financial aid cost of attendance is meant to cover 2 round trips from home to campus, and it's based on the state that you're from. So those last 3 items, the personal expenses, books, and travel, are estimates of what the costs are going to be. The personal expenses and the books are actually based on surveys of current students. So we ask students, what do you typically spend in a month in food outside of your meal plan, or in entertainment, or in sporting events on campus, those kinds of personal expenses. We throw out the ones that are spending, they're going to Tahoe every weekend, and we throw out the ones who tell us that they don't spend any money, and take that average of what's left in the middle, and that's what that number is. Even for students who are not receiving financial aid, parents, that's a helpful thing to know, that that's what a typical Stanford student is spending. So if your student is asking you for $1,000 a month to cover their personal expenses, they might be a little extravagant. compared to most of our students on campus, okay? So that's what that cost of attendance is, and the aid that's being offered is against that full cost of attendance. So it's not just the bill, it's the full cost of attendance that we're worried about. So what comes in next are those scholarships and grants. In this example, the only resource that's available is scholarship from Stanford. And that results in a net cost to the family of $19,700. So that's what needs to be paid toward the cost of attendance after scholarships and grants are applied. So this is the heart of it, right? The parent contribution, because this really drives to a large extent, and for most families, the amount of scholarship that is available for students. And of course, we use a formula to calculate an expected parent contribution. You know, you filled out all those forms. We ask for all kinds of information, right? Lots of detailed information about your family income, your assets, the number of family members, how many kids are going to be in college. Do you have other expenses? Do you have kids in private school? All of that information goes into a formula that calculates an expected parent contribution. And we do that because we're trying to be consistent in how we deal with our families. We want to be fair and equitable in how we are treating people. Our philosophy is that people with similar financial situations should have a similar expectation, right? So all of that sounds good, but the reality of life is that, no two families are exactly the same. We often feel like we're trying to fit square pegs into round holes. So the more you can tell us about what makes your family unique, what is individual about your family, we can take that information into account. Because this is a relatively complex formula behind the scenes, it's hard for families to know in advance what they're going to qualify for at Stanford. And they see that sticker price, that great big number I had in the cost of attendance. I don't even like to talk about that great big number. And they are afraid to even apply to Stanford. So I'm so glad that your kids overcame that and decided to apply. And we've done a couple of things to help make that easier to understand. Back in 2008, we started this treatment where we have said families, right now it's families with income less than $65,000 a year who have typical assets for that income level. Those parents are not going to be expected to contribute towards educational costs, so towards that cost of attendance. And for families with income less than $125,000, and I'm talking about total income here, both taxed and untaxed income, for those families, typically the parent contribution is not going to be more than about $14,700. If you look at that formula that I showed you first, if parents' contribution is that amount, then the amount of scholarship that you're going to receive will cover the tuition at Stanford. So the media loves that because they get to say, free tuition at Stanford if you make less than $125, right? So that's how that works. And the reason why we have that caveat, typical assets for that income level, because all of you are going to say to me, well, I'm just going to quit my job and not work anymore so my kid can go to Stanford for free. I know you all know that's not realistic, right? Your family would not function that way. And these policies are really meant to reach out to families who are low-income families, true low-income families. So somebody who is recently retired but living in a multi-million-dollar home and sitting on millions of dollars of retirement assets, but maybe doesn't have a whole lot of actual income in the previous year, would not qualify for that zero parent contribution. And I think you all can understand why we would do that. So, and one of the things that has concerned me a lot about this policy is the media grabs onto those two messages, zero parent contribution at 65, tuition covered at 125, and people think we don't give aid to people with higher incomes. And that's not true. So there's lots of families who receive financial aid with higher incomes. We're talking about almost $70,000 a year that needs to be covered. So it takes a lot of income to be able to cover that kind of expense. So families at higher income levels absolutely still qualify for financial aid. And you'll press me and ask, what's the upper limit? And at that upper income level, families' income situations are often more complex than they are at the lower income levels. So it's hard for me to give an exact cutoff because it depends on the family situation. You know, a family that has 2 or 3, or I've seen as many as 4 kids in school at the same time, even if they have a very healthy income, is going to have a hard time paying for Stanford. Right? So all of those factors get taken into account. And what we've done is we have a calculator on our website for prospective students. I hope many of you use that when you're in the process to help understand what kinds of financial aid might be available. That calculator takes a conservative approach, right? It's not taking into account any of the special circumstances that you might share with us and that the staff can take into account when we're doing our analysis. So that's just the basics of how we manage that parent contribution. And I think it's important for you to understand that because as situations arrive, over the next 4 years, if income changes, if heaven forbid somebody loses a job, there's an illness in the family, those kinds of issues that drain your finances, you really have no choice about them, we want to know about that in the financial aid office because we can take that into account in our formula and perhaps qualify you for more scholarship fund when those situations come up. All right, student responsibility. So how many of you parents saw that net price number and thought, well, I have to pay this whole thing? Students, we want students to take some responsibility for some of these expenses. And they can do it quite easily, actually. So a typical award letter would show that $2,800 in academic year earnings and a student contribution or work over the summer of $2,200. We expect our students across all 4 years, and we've had this $5,000 minimum in place for several years now, and we don't increase it as they get higher in their academic career. So $5,000 a year is the minimum of what we expect of students. If they have assets in their own name, that expectation might be a little bit higher. We expect that students are able to contribute 5% of the assets they have in their own name each year. So we never expect the whole thing. It's 5% of what's left every year. And that job earnings of $2,800 during the academic year, when you understand that our minimum wage on campus for students averages about $14 an hour right now, and you've all heard the California legislature talking about $15 an hour, so it's on its way up. Students can easily do that level of work in 8 to 10 hours a week of work. Those earnings that students receive go directly to them. So remember, these go against the total cost of attendance. So expecting a student to earn enough to cover their own personal expenses, maybe use their summer earnings to help cover their books, maybe even buy one of their plane tickets to get here, is a perfectly reasonable expectation. And our experience is that our students are able to do that, okay? And I know as parents, we worry about expecting our children to work, right? They've worked so hard to get here. We want them to focus on their academics and do well while they're here. Research shows that students who are working at this level, 8 to 10 hours a week, actually do better academically than their peers who are not working because it plugs them into the community especially if they're working on campus, they might work with someone like me who understands the academic schedule and knows when they need to take some extra time off to study, but work enough hours to have some spending money in their pocket. Absolutely is a workable solution. Stanford is a unique campus, I think, in that students don't have to be eligible for federal work-study, which is a federal program meant to go to low-income students, Pell Grant recipients, which absolutely helps them to find jobs, because then the department that's hiring them doesn't have to pay their salary, right? That money is coming from the federal program. But all students are able to find work on Stanford's campus. There are lots of opportunities for students to work either here on campus or in the local community, which is not true, has not been true everywhere, depending on the economy in that area. So Stanford is a really welcoming place for students to work. They may not be able to work in a Nobel Prize winning lab as a freshman, but as long as they're willing to be flexible. So let's talk a little bit about outside scholarships. That is another way that students can handle that student responsibility. So we allow students to use any outside scholarships that they have won. You know, I'm talking about the Rotary Club scholarships, the school PTA scholarships, all that kind of money. They can use those to meet their student responsibility. So what we do with those outside scholarships as they come in is, first they will replace that academic year earnings. Next they will replace the student contribution, unless you tell us you'd like it to be otherwise, right? We are not tracking the number of hours students are working. We're not paying attention closely to that. So if you'd prefer that it replace summer earnings, that's okay, either way. But if your outside scholarships are more than the amount of the student responsibility that's in the student's financial aid package, and they are receiving need-based aid scholarship from Stanford, that additional amount of outside scholarships will reduce Stanford scholarships offer. Why do we do that? Because our financial aid program is need-based. And if students have other resources to meet their need, then we want to use our resources to meet the other students' needs. Does that make sense? So in that way, that's our partnership with you to make our financial aid program affordable for Stanford. Now, we do work with students. A lot of times students, their first year, have lots of outside scholarships that are non-renewable and may not carry forward to future years. So if students want to work with their agencies to spread some of that money out over 4 years, you know, if they go back to the Rotary Club and say, don't send that until my sophomore year, that's okay. They don't have to use it all in their first year. The one caveat with that is we can't hold that money for them. So if money is sent to us by an outside agency, we need to apply it in the year that we receive it, okay? Students who are seeing their scholarship reduced because of outside awards, if they have an expense for a laptop, you know, they need to buy a new computer, many students do their freshman year, we would add that expense to the cost of attendance and allow them to use some of that scholarship money for that outside scholarship expense. So that's another way that students can use their outside scholarships and still keep the full value of Stanford scholarships. So we're willing to be flexible and work with students on those outside scholarships to a point, however. So know that up front. And we ask students to report those outside scholarships starting in May. They'll do that through Access to let us know about those scholarships. So just to make this point perfectly clear, here is Leland's award letter with an outside scholarship added in. You can see right there, outside scholarship and grant has been added. So that has reduced the net cost by $2,000, and the student's job has been reduced by $2,000. So that's, for we visual people, that's how it works when outside scholarships come in. All right, let's talk about financing options. Down at the bottom of the award letter is a section for student loans. And for most of our students who are receiving scholarship funds from Stanford, that was blank because we don't expect students to borrow to meet their student responsibility. But that option is available. I see a lot of upper class students, juniors and seniors, who have fabulous opportunities for internships over the summer, for example. Wonderful opportunities, but they're unpaid. It makes perfect sense to use a $2,000 student loan to cover that part of their student responsibility in that year that they're not able to do their summer earnings. That's okay, totally up to you to use that resource. And for students who applied for aid, but we determined the parent contribution was high enough that we would not offer scholarship funds, we sent you an award letter showing the amount of federal student loans that you're eligible for. So first-year students can borrow $5,500 in the direct loan, the federal direct loan program. Anybody else who would like to borrow to replace some of that student responsibility, or even to help parents with the expected parent contribution, let us know in the financial aid office, and we will offer to you the best student loan that we have available. So a little more information about the federal direct student loan. There are both subsidized and unsubsidized loans available, and what I mean by that, a subsidized loan is based on federal need, so the FAFSA calculation is important here. So if you've demonstrated federal need that we haven't met already with scholarship funds, there may be some subsidized loan available, and that means the interest is not accruing during the time you're enrolled in school. Interest will start accruing 6 months after you leave school and when you're making payments. For everybody who qualifies for federal student aid, regardless of their need, they can borrow an unsubsidized student loan. The interest on those loans start accruing at the time the loan is dispersed. You're not required to make payments while you're in school, but that interest is accruing during that period of time. These loans are fixed interest rate, so the year that you take out your loan determines the amount of the interest rate for the life of the loan. The rates are set on July 1 every year for the coming year. They're based on the 10-year T-bill plus 2.05% for those of you who know what the 10-year T-bill is. The current interest rate for students this year is 4.29%, so not horrible. It does have an origination fee just over 1%, so the government keeps that percentage right off the top. So these loans, they're called direct loans because you are borrowing directly from the US Treasury via Stanford. So all of the paperwork, you sign promissory notes, everything is done online, and Stanford disperses those funds to our students at the start of each quarter. The limits for the direct loans are $5,500 total as freshmen. $3,500 of it can be subsidized if there's eligibility, and the remaining $2,000 is always unsubsidized. $6,500 is the limit for sophomores with $2,000 unsubsidized, and $7,500 a year for juniors and seniors with $2,000 unsubsidized. So you can see if students stick to the federal direct loan program, I know you have all seen the media coverage of people who are deeply in debt and can't start their futures because such a, oh, woe is me, horrible situation. Those individuals that they pick out for those stories are not the norm. So nationally, students who finish bachelor's degrees are borrowing about $30,000. At Stanford, last year, 22% of our graduating class had borrowed. The other 78% graduated debt-free. The 22% who had borrowed, the median indebtedness for that group was just over $16,000. Okay, so our students are borrowing responsibly for the kinds of reasons that I've talked about, and are making those payments. We have a less than 1% default rate 3 years after students enter repayment. And it's nothing we do in the financial aid office, it's because our students are working, managing their financial lives, so it's a good thing. So those are the student loan programs. There is a federal parent loan program that's available. So parents, if you're looking for a way to finance the expected parent contribution, parents can actually borrow up to the full amount of the cost of attendance that's not covered by other forms of aid. right? We do suggest taking out the student direct loan first because it has a little bit lower interest rate. It's the same deal with the Federal Plus loan where the rates are set once a year. The current rate is 6.84%. The thing I like least about the Federal Plus loans is there is over a 4% origination fee that they keep right off the top, so that's a little expensive. There's a 10-year repayment period. If you're interested in the Plus loans, that is also just a totally electronic process, and you would start that process from the financial aid website after July 1, so no need to rush into it. The only people they disqualify for the Plus loans are, there is a credit check involved. What they're looking for is the absence of negative credit. So if you've had a bankruptcy recently, you might be denied for the Plus loan, but they're not doing other kinds of typical credit checks. There are other parent loan options available, and we do have some information on our website about things to think about when you're comparing. You are probably already getting mail at home because somehow they know you have a senior in the house, right? From banks marketing directly to you. There are some new private parent loans that are just coming out this month. Sally Mae announced one a few weeks ago, actually. So depending on your credit situation, it may be possible to get either a private student loan or a private parent loan at better interest rates, frankly, than the federal student loan. So if you're thinking about borrowing, it might be worth your time to look into a situation like that. Student loans, know that typically private student loans require a cosigner, so that is not something they can get on their own. The federal student loans do not need a cosigner. The students have that debt in their name, and it's actually an excellent way for them to establish credit down the road. But a private student loan would require a cosigner, typically a parent. So just know what you're getting into when you're looking at those loans. Most of our families, on average, that expected parent contribution are handling about a third of it from their current income, a third of it from savings or past income, and a third of it from debt or future income. So they're just spreading that out. TJ will also talk about installment payment plan that allows you to spread the payments out in 1 year. So if you're just looking for short-term solutions, we've got those too. So things to look at. All right, so your questions now are, so I think I'm okay with this year, but what happens year after year after year, right? You've just given me an award letter for 1 year. So we do ask you to fill out those forms again. We do have a later deadline, so we hope it is not so onerous on you. And there are some changes coming at the federal level next year that is going to make the FAFSA available a little bit earlier. And we're shifting the year that we're focusing all our questions about back a year. So the 2015 calendar year that you filled out your profile in FAFSA for this year, and you had to estimate information because we asked you for it in February and you hadn't done your taxes yet, and now you have to go back and correct the FAFSA, all that complicated gobbledygook. Next year's freshmen won't have to deal with that because they will be using their calendar year 2015 income as the basis for their application. And so that will affect our continuing students as well. We hope that will simplify things. We are not changing our deadlines, however. So continuing students don't have to turn in their financial aid applications until April 30th, the end of the month. So think about what we're doing in the financial aid office this month. We're dealing with all of you. So happy to have you. And then we will turn to dealing with our continuing students as soon as we've got the freshman class in place. So we asked them for April 30th to turn in the forms. And it's the FAFSA and the profile. We typically don't ask for the full tax return again unless you're self-employed or have something complicated going on. What we ask parents to do is give us a copy of their W-2s. And for next year, it'll be 2015 again, so you've already got them. So hold on to your W-2s. And what we're looking for in those applications are really any changes to your financial situation. If things remain the same from year to year, then you can expect a very similar financial aid package. As a matter of fact, typically our costs do go up every year. I will admit to that. The last several years, tuition has gone up by 3.5%, and room and board as well. And as those expenses get higher, if the parent contribution remains the same, what's going to get bigger? Scholarship from Stanford, right? So I'm the one person on campus when the trustees are having that conversation about where to set tuition for the next year. They say, yeah, Karen, I remember. I know. We have to increase the financial aid budget every year. So as tuition goes up, financial aid goes up as well. You can think of that application process as our annual check-in with you, right? We're just checking in to make sure you're still doing okay, that nothing's changed in your financial situation. The things that can make a big difference are things like changes in your family situation. Another sibling going to college, I will warn you now, is a big change. So what happens when there are two family members in college, we still calculate that expected parent contribution, and then we divide it among the children who are in college. So that means you're going to qualify for more scholarship funds during those years when you've got two in school. If you have two now and will be going to one in a couple of years, think about what that's going to mean, and remember that I'm warning you now, okay? So you've heard that message, right? And if your situation changes during the year, we do want you to let us know about that. You don't have to wait for the application process to come up for the following year. Those financial aid packages that we've offered now are not carved in stone. We can make changes when family situations warrant a change. So we want to know about that. My joke is, if you win the lotto, you don't have to run in and tell us. We will figure that out in the next application process, right? But if things get worse, if you run into some difficult family situations, somebody changes jobs, et cetera, come talk to us about that and we'll tell you what your options are. Fair deal? Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to TJ at this point to talk about what happens next, and then I will be back to answer questions. And I don't know why the slide's not advancing, TJ. You can take this. It has frozen. There you go.
Oh, lovely.
Just left and right.
Oh, okay. Excellent. Hello. It's very great to see you today. This is probably my favorite week of the year. Other than maybe orientation is a good week too, when the students are actually here. So before I jump in and tell you all about the billing, I just want to do a very quick check of who's in the audience today. So how many of you are California natives? You just came from the state of California, large population. Okay, of the rest of you, either domestic, or what about international? International, couple of you? Great. How many folks in the audience are alum of Stanford? Welcome back to the farm. It's always great to have alum come visit. So do I have any incoming freshmen, potential freshmen in the Well, welcome. It's always good to see that. You know, this particular session is designed toward parents, but it's always nice to see our incoming students here as well. So welcome, each of you. It's very nice to see you. My name, as Karen said, is, I have to look at the piece of paper, is TJ Fletcher, and I am the Director of Student Financial Services. I am the bill collector. So you see why I enjoy this so much. It gets me a chance to get out of the office, and it's not often that bill collectors get audiences like this. So thank you. So a little bit about all of the great financial information that you just heard from Karen. That's the good news. What I'm going to share with you is more good news, actually. I don't want to call it bad news, but the way that Stanford operates is that we gather all of the expenses that are related to Stanford that we can put onto one kind of billing or one account for our students. We gather everything, not only tuition, but we gather the room and the board and the Stanford generated costs so that we don't have to pay individually. So we gather all of those costs and then we put them all on what we call the student account. And then once we gather them all of the financial aid that you just heard about, you're not going to see much of it because it's all going to come to me. It's all going to apply to the bill. Now, any excess that might be awarded to you for the non-billable items, such as the travel, the personal expenses, may come in the way of a refund to the student, but we'll get to that in a little bit. So my office is basically billing and collections. And I know that is something that is extremely dry, but still one that we just want to make you aware of. I do have a bit of good news, and that is that while Stanford prepares the award letters based on the family and the financial contribution of the family, the person that's ultimately responsible for the payment of any excess amount due is not the parent. Isn't that great news? We hold, it does have to be paid. We hold the student responsible because they're getting the benefit from the education. So my office deals primarily with students in trying to get them to understand. See, they know they don't have to pay, so they're leaving. All right, very quickly before I jump into the guts, and my part will be brief, but I do just want to give you a little factoid, a little trivia question for you. We are celebrating, you may have noticed, 125 years at Stanford. And that would be 1891. Isn't that great? Yay! Sometimes I feel like I've been here for all 125 of them. But I'll tell you that would be 1891 was the first class, if I'm counting correctly. So in 1891, does anybody know what the tuition cost was? Free, exactly. My, how things change, right? It was absolutely free back in the day. Alrighty, so let me just jump in. Here is an example of what we will do once we gather all the expenses. And I don't expect you to see this other than to read this, other than to recognize this thing as a bill. I'm going to highlight some areas that I do want to bring to your attention. First highlight is right-hand corner, payment due date and a total amount due. If you see nothing else on the bill, that's the one thing that will need to be taken into consideration. The next really important thing about the bill is a term summary. If you're a little bit more curious as to wonder what that total amount includes, we'll tell you each term by term what might be, if there's any amount left, or what the total amount is and the credits that have come in. The third item on the bill, and this is one that you should pay close attention to, is what we call our anticipated aid. So if the billing occurs, the actual amount of the financial aid award will not have dispersed. This is going to tell you how much is coming. So in this particular case, you wouldn't pay the total amount due. You would just know that you're getting anticipated aid and you would only look at the difference. I say that because looking at a total amount without the aid attached to it is a very large number. And we don't want you to do that. We only want you to pay the difference. Because once it is anticipated, that means that financial aid has already sent me the amount that they're going to cover on the student's behalf. Next item I want to share with you is what to pay. Any balance that's due after aid applies. In some cases, it may be zero. In others, it may be small amounts. Some of the items that might show up on the bill, example, would include what we call monthly incidental charges. Stanford Card Plan. Stanford Card Plan is a program where the student can charge items using their university ID card in local Stanford sponsored places. For example, the university bookstore here on campus. If the student needs to buy something and doesn't have the immediate funds, they can use their Stanford Card Plan to go into the bookstore and buy it. This would, of course, then land on the bill and be due in the next billing cycle. But it does give a little bit of relief for those students that might need to buy something the first day they get here, whether it be a book or a supply that just simply don't have the funds. So the Stanford Card Plan is an option to do that. There is a limit, however, to the total amount. Each term, 3 terms in an academic year, they can charge up to $1,000 per term. So they can use up to $1,000 in incidentals. Other places that take the Stanford Card Plan include some of the eateries that are not part of the dining plan, like a Starbucks or some of the other eateries around campus. Other items that may show up on the bill is if your son or daughter take in-room HD and cabling, that they would charge that separate as well. And cardinal dollars. Cardinal dollars are part of the dining plan that gives you extra dollars to use for primarily in the dining halls in the non-board type of purchases, to purchase late night meals, etc. So those are an example of things that might, in addition to what you would think is your normal tuition and fees, might land on the bill. Next, I want to say something about the Stanford Health Insurance. So at Stanford, we require all students have health insurance. Many of our incoming freshmen, especially undergraduate students, will be on their parents' insurance plans. If that is true, and if you do not want to be billed for this, it's very important that the student waive this insurance. Stanford's health insurance plan is called Cardinal Care. You may have heard about it. You may have already signed up for it. It's a very good program. It's a very good insurance program. And I am going to bill it unless it is waived. Okay, and I can tell you that the annual fee is $49.68 this year. That's a pretty big chunk of change if you don't need it. So I bring this up in this session not to push the insurance or not, but to say that if your son or daughter is covered already, this is an expense that you don't want to have to worry about. So there is a waive deadline, and it's September 15th. There will be many opportunities for your son or daughter to go out to the site and actually waive this fee. And I just want to remind you, this is one of the takeaways I want you to leave today with, and that is make sure it's waived if you don't need it. Because unfortunately, after September 15th, Stanford's going to pay for your son or daughter to have that insurance. And once it's paid, there's really no way to waive it at that point. So please make sure that the health insurance waiver, if you already have coverage, is done. And that can be done online in Access prior to September 15th. I'm also going to charge a campus health services fee. That is not the same as insurance. Campus health services fee is to support our Vaden Health Center on campus for basic health and welfare services. You can read more about what that fee does. It's substantially less than the health insurance cost, and it will be billed on a quarterly basis. Again, more information from Vaden Health Center. If you've not visited them, I think it's probably a part of your program. They're available, and the site's very, very helpful in giving you exactly what the plans cover, and if you want to cover them, or if you actually want to make sure you do the waiver. Okay, I want to talk to you now. I've kind of been telling you everything that I'm going to throw on the bill and charge. I want to tell you as parents and the few of the students in the room, here are things you can avoid. And it's very important to look at these. So Stanford has something called Late Study List. Late Study List is what we call our enrollment. So students are required to be enrolled the first day of class. If they are not enrolled the first day of class, they are subject to a late study list fee. And the fee is $200. So that if you're late 3 terms, that's $600 of really unnecessary costs. So the way to avoid this is simply enroll. Make sure you enroll by the first day of class. The second item I want to tell you about is a late payment fee. So when I bill you, and I'll show you the dates a little later, when I bill you and it has a due date, if you don't make your payment on time, or if the student doesn't, if there's any balance remaining and the payment's not made on time, there is a 1% late payment fee. And of course, the way to avoid that is to pay the bill. The next item is a lost ID card. So if students lose their ID card and they need to get another one, and your ID card is is the way that you get around campus. It's how you get in your dorm. It's how you go to events. It's how you get into the dining hall and everything. If you lose that, there's like a $20 fee. So to avoid that, make sure that you hang on to your ID card. The last one that I mentioned here is just a heads up. Housing damage fees start at $50. And all of you that are homeowners, you know what I'm talking about. It ain't cheap to fix something that goes wrong in the house. So damage fees for anything in the residence hall start at $50, and I've seen them as high as $500 for damage. Clearly, just don't damage the room and you avoid that cost altogether. These items can appear on the bill, but these items I don't want to appear on the bill. All righty, when to pay. Here we go. We actually do billing every month. The big bills, which have the quarterly tuition fees, will be coming out. We call them the big bill. August, November, and February. The August bill, which will come out around the 20th, will be due the 15th of the following month. Every bill comes out on the 20th and is due the 15th of the next month. So in August, on or around August the 20th, you and the student will see the first bill that will contain charges that have been gathered from Stanford. The second and third bill, we call that they're not big bills because they're just the non or the discretionary funds that have been used to purchase items. They're the smaller items that could appear on the bill. And in November, we're going to bill again for the winter term, and then in February, we will be billing for the spring term. All again, 2015. And I saw some of you taking pictures of this. It's all on the website, and I also think this presentation will be made available on the financial aid website as well. So know that. All right, So how to pay? I think some of you that were here earlier, I was talking about how some of the millennials and the Generation Ys and the Generation Zs and people become less and less dependent on paper and more electronic. So we do everything in our office electronically. We actually bill electronically, and most of our students pay electronically. So we have something called Stanford ePay. It's through Access, again, the portal that the students use, and it will handle our online billing and payment. Now, some of you are probably saying, well, I really want to pay, even though I know my son or daughter is responsible, I want to be the one to actually see the bill and pay. Good news is, that's great, you can. The student will need to go in and actually set you up as a authorized payer. What that means is that the student's giving me permission to send you notification that this bill is ready. It gives me an opportunity to send it to you, and then it gives you the great opportunity to pay that on behalf of your son or daughter, which we really appreciate. So once you get that, you'll be notified that a bill is ready. You go to the site, you pay electronically, and it's done. Karen mentioned earlier that there are sometimes folks that are intimidated, or simply, in my particular case, it would be hard for me to come up with that large chunk, one time, and I would kind of like to spread it out over 9 months. So the academic year being 9 months, we have 3 terms with big bills, but if you want to spread that over 9 months, those big bills over 9 months and pay, this is what we have available for you. It's on our website. It's called the Installment Payment Plan. It acts like a budget opportunity for you. If you want to just say, I want to pay this $3,000, that's my portion, and I want to do it in the form of $1,000, $1,000, you can. The sign-up dates are listed here, and as you can see, basically, rather than paying September, December, and March, you're paying a little, 1/3 all of the 9 months of the term. For the families that take this, they really like it. It allows them to do the budgeting that they want to do. A couple of things about this. I'll just say that we don't charge any setup fee for this, so there's no disadvantage in doing it. If you want to do it, it's there. We charge no setup fee. There's no penalties if you don't make your agreed upon installment plan, as long as the final payment's due by the big bill due date. Like, for example, autumn would be September, and the payments are all online. And as a courtesy, you would be notified that you signed up for it and that the payment is due. What about overpayments? So from time to time, the student's account may result in a credit balance. Perhaps this could, you may say, how could that possibly happen? It could be that the scholarship that's aided is more than what's on the bill, meaning that Karen has given you more money than I'm actually billing for. In some cases, students may waive a fee. For example, if you went ahead and paid for the insurance and then waived it by the due date, that would show up as a credit on the account as an overpayment. And there are other, just other options that might occur, but those are the 2 typical ones. Now, what happens in those cases is that we will refund the student for any overpayment of aid. We process those 3 times a week. So if a student is getting aid or excess loan funds, et cetera, those will all be processed in a very timely manner. And we really recommend students sign up for direct deposit in order to get the money the most efficiently and quickly. Years ago, this was a more difficult discussion than it is these days, because I don't know anybody that uses paper checks or gets mail anymore. I mean, most everybody does everything electronically. I mean, does anybody pay their bills with a check? One? Not all of them. But, you know, it's very rare, so we're kind of the same way. We don't really want to write a check to a student, especially because they can get like 24 turnaround of funds if they sign up for direct deposit. We encourage you, if your son or daughter doesn't already have a banking relationship, there are several on campus that they should feel comfortable with. Wells Fargo, Bank of America is at the mall, and we have the Stanford Credit Union on campus as well. All are institutions that they can sign up for. They get student discounts as far as fees are related, so it's a great opportunity, and then that's how they would get their refunds for any excess. If by chance there are excess in cash payment, and it does happen sometimes, the bills get crossed in the mail and maybe the parent will pay the $100 cable fee and the student pays it and it shows up, we will hang on to that credit balance from cash overpayments and use it to pay the incidental charges that come up over the next months. If at the end of the academic year there's still a credit balance of overpayment there, we'll refund it to the student. All right, one other, and we're getting near our end of our time, but I do want to say, you know, one of the things that we're most proud of with our students is, as Karen mentioned earlier, you know, those that take out loans aren't, you know, anywhere near the national average of what the debt is. Most of our students leave debt-free. A lot of this is because not only of their upbringing and how they have been raised by you, but also we try to try and give them opportunity to learn about cash. You know, we may not be teachers in the classroom, but we do try to help them with real life issues like paying your bills. What's it mean when I sign a loan? What does it mean in my loan I don't have to go into repay until after I leave school? All of these sorts of things. So I don't want to overwhelm anybody, but we do have a very nice online tool available for students that helps them with this, what we call financial literacy type stuff, and it's called Cash Course. You can link to it from either the financial aid website or the student financial website. And this Cash Course is just a way to help your son or daughter, maybe even budgeting. It's very simple, just how to budget my expenses so that I don't go out all in the first week and spend everything, and understand how to, you know, money matters. So this is a very nice way to do that. It's kind of fun, and it's easy to do. And we really want you to know that it's available there, so you don't have to feel like you're responsible for all of the training in that area. I think I'm almost done, and we'll get into questions and answers. So a couple of takeaways that if you get nothing else, let's make sure we've got these. It's very important that you know what your financial aid will and will not pay. All right? It's also very important that the bill is the student's responsibility. You can be an authorized payer, but the bill is the student's responsibility. Third item, please, 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 if the student has, in your opinion, adequate health care, please make sure that they waive health care by September 15th. Students set up direct deposit for credit balances. This will get their money quicker. And it's something that we want them all to do. And I think 5 is my last takeaway, and that is please notify our financial aid office if anything in your family situation changes that could impact your financial aid award. Yeah. So here's how you get answers. This is all available to you online. Financial aid office, you probably know where it is. They have a link. Student Financial Services, we're available. And at this time, I'm going to open it up for some questions. We've got about 15 minutes, and we can start taking some questions now.
And let me say, while you're gathering your thoughts, one of my colleagues from the financial aid office, Ron Diaz, is in the very back corner of the room.
So we will answer your questions now for the good of the group, but if you have an individual question, we'll hang out after we close.
And also, because we are streaming this, we will repeat your questions. It's not that we didn't understand what you said. We're repeating it for the video. I saw a hand right here. Yes, ma'am.
Campus health service fee, that is separate from the waiver. That's something that everybody pays at 203.
Correct. That's that $203 per term. So it's times 3 for the whole year.
And
Correct.
the campus health service fee is included in the cost of attendance for financial aid recipients. It's automatically already there for everybody because that is a fee that's not waivable. The health insurance, we don't automatically include for everybody because, as TJ said, most families have coverage already. And healthcare expenses is something that we have considered when we've calculated that expected parent contribution. But for our low-income families especially, if you need Cardinal Care, if you want to take Cardinal Care, you have to have health insurance, and we want you to have health insurance too, and financial aid will cover those costs especially for our zero parent contribution families.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, the question is, what kind of jobs can students do on campus?
All kinds of things.
Come work for me.
Yeah, exactly. TJ hires students to work in their office. We've got a crew of students who are working on that Mind Over Money project, financial literacy issues. A lot of administrative departments and academic departments hire students for all kinds of things, receptionist, basic coverage of things. So there's the glamorous working in a lab, doing something exciting with the faculty member. There are paid positions for doing things like that too, that might not happen till you're a junior and senior. Mm-hmm. And then there's the good old, working in the cafe, in the bookstore, or, all kinds of jobs like that. So there are lots of different opportunities.
I would just add to that, we have found in my office, we hire students for the Mind Over Money initiative, the financial literacy initiative. And it's, the further the further my age gets from the students, the less I really understand what's going on, right? And I'm just being very frank with you. So I rely on the students to actually keep me, informed. So the students then are actually mentoring the other students on things like, oh, here's how I did a budget, or here's how I did and it's a really great growth opportunity for our students, and those are the types of jobs. And still, it's 10 hours a week, and we understand when students need to be in class or when there's finals week and they can't work. So it's a very good opportunity there. One
additional thing I'll say about jobs is you can't look for one this weekend. Wait until September. A lot of departments don't even post their jobs until the first week of classes anyway, so we're not ready for you yet. You're not missing an opportunity by not looking early. So, yes. And online, the Career Education Center has a website where they post all that information.
Okay. Yes, sir.
That was it.
She did.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Does Stanford offer academic scholarships that are not based on need? Basically, my question is, my daughter has received admissions from other universities where she's got full tuition and board regardless of finance.
Yeah, I understand the question. Sure. So the question is, does Stanford, I'll boil it down to, does Stanford offer any merit aid? And the answer is no. The only area where we offer aid that's not based on need are athletic scholarships, and as part of our participation in a Division I athletic program. So all of the aid that Stanford awards is based on financial need and goes through the financial aid office. And I know that puts some of, our students are fabulous. All of them are fabulous. and many of them are offered merit awards at other institutions, and that puts you in a really difficult position. And I'm sorry we can't compete with that kind of situation.
Yes, yes, sir.
Waiver in the healthcare that Stanford offers, or like any off your, if you don't live in a dorm, for example, you have no more room fees. So how does decreasing your net cost of attendance impact your scholarship or your parent contribution?
Okay, so the question is how, if you choose to live off campus or waive the health insurance, how does that affect your financial aid eligibility? So for most students, we haven't included health insurance in your cost of attendance in the first place because we kind of expect you to waive it. All of our students, first-year students, are required to live in the residence halls, and 98% of our students live in the residence halls all 4 years. So it's a rare situation, actually, when our undergraduates are living off campus. But we find that this is not an inexpensive area in which to live. And so actually students who are living off campus or on campus, their cost of attendance stays the same. And if you don't have charges on the account, then those funds are released to you at the start of each quarter to budget to meet your living expenses.
Okay, yes, ma'am. The question is, health insurance, do you have to waive it every year? I don't know the answer to that.
The answer is yes.
You do, don't you?
So at the time you waive it, you provide information about what coverage you do have. So the Vaden Health Center is making sure that all of our students have adequate coverage. So again, it's checking in with you every year to make sure that's still true.
Yeah. And adding on to that, you don't have to waive it every term of a given year.
Yeah, it's just once.
So once you waive it, you're out of it for that entire year.
There's lots of reminders about it.
Yeah, so the question is, do they, I guess that would be Vaden, send emails to you to remind you to waive? Yes, there will be the opportunities there. I saw a hand here. Yes, ma'am.
If she has Kaiser coverage, can she use that here on campus?
So we're not experts in healthcare, but I can tell you that Kaiser is local. Yeah, there's one in Redwood City, there's one, so not on campus. So your campus health service fee, the $200 a quarter that everybody pays, allows you to go to Vaden when you have a sore throat or just need to see a doctor, right? But if you need to see a specialist, that's when you need your insurance. And Kaiser, that means a bus up to Redwood City or down to Santa Clara, but it works.
Okay, way in the back. Yes, ma'am.
Stanford President Scholars Program. We haven't had a President Scholars Program for about 15 years.
Yes, sir.
Do you have one time payment at the beginning of the year, or it's also prorated and divided up by the semester, by the term?
Can you repeat the question?
Does he have a choice to pay the full amount at the start of the year? So if he wants to pay all 3 quarters at once.
That's an interesting question. You can do that, but we do not discount. So it doesn't really it doesn't buy you anything to do that. But
Simplifies your life a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. So you can do that. At my office, we would be more than happy to take that. Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
Is financial aid available for study abroad?
Yes, let's talk about study abroad for a second. So the question was, will financial aid help cover study abroad opportunities? And yes. So Stanford has, and I hope you get a chance to visit during this weekend, the Being Overseas Studies program. And so Stanford has, I think it's 13 centers around the world where our students are studying abroad. And if you're doing one of those Stanford programs, You pay your tuition to Stanford and your financial aid doesn't change. And as a matter of fact, we increase it a little bit to recognize that you're studying abroad and have travel expenses and those kinds of things. So absolutely, we encourage students to study abroad. This is a wonderful opportunity to do it.
Okay, we have time for one more question. Yes, ma'am.
Explain how you determine financial aid from parents that are divorced.
So the question is, for parents that are divorced, how do we look at that expected parent contribution? What are we looking at? It's actually very similar to what we're doing for, two-parent households, single-parent households. We are looking at each parent's household separately and doing a very similar calculation to calculate an expected contribution from each parent. So, the federal financial aid formula, when you're filling out the FAFSA, doesn't ask for information about a non-custodial parent. But when you complete the profile for Stanford, it follows up and asks for that non-custodial parent information, because we believe very strongly that both parents should be involved in a child's education and are willing to take that responsibility. But when there are situations where that's not possible or something's going on, we have those individual conversations with families. But the calculation itself is actually very similar for each family.
Okay, we've come to the end of our time. We do have, as Karen said, Ron Diaz back in the corner and Karen here. If you want to ask specific questions, we'll hang around for just a few moments. But thank you guys so much and enjoy the rest of the week.
Thank you.